Welcome, gentle listener. Welcome back. Tonight, you do not need to do anything at all. You can let the day fold itself away, one small task at a time, and leave it on the other side of the door. Settle into wherever you happen to be. A pillow under your head, a blanket close around you, the light low or off. Take a slow breath in and a slow breath out, and another. Notice how the air feels a little softer the second time. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw soften. Nothing here asks anything of you. There is no place to be. There is only this quiet hour and the sound of a voice walking with you for a while. And tonight, very gently, we are going to walk together into a place that has been quiet for a very long time, a city by a slow river, in a country that no longer carries its old name on any map. The river is the Euphrates. The country then was called Babylonia. The city you may already know, Babylon. We will drift into it on a particular evening, in the long reign of a king named Nebuchadnezzar, more than 2,500 years ago. There will be no battles tonight, no falling kingdoms, no urgent news. We will not stand in a throne room or watch armies on the horizon. Instead, we will walk the streets at the hour when the brickmakers close their workshops and the lamps begin to come on, one by one behind small shuttered windows. We will pass under a gate the color of deep evening sky. We will hear a river move under a stone bridge. We will look up at a tower so tall that travelers generations later would tell stories about it that we still half remember. None of this needs to be remembered. None of it needs to be held. If your mind drifts off in the middle of a street, it is welcome to drift. The city is patient. It has been waiting a very long time. It does not mind at all if you arrive by sleeping. So picture this with me. We come in on foot, the way most travelers came. The road is a gentle dust track between fields of barley and emmer wheat, the kind of fields that turn pale gold in the late afternoon. Date palms line the irrigation ditches, their trunks ringed and rough, their crowns moving very slightly in a small evening wind. The air smells of warm clay and water and crushed green things, and then somewhere in the soft distance you begin to make out a long, low line on the horizon, a line that does not move, a line that is not the sky and not quite the ground. The walls of Babylon. They take a while to read with your eyes. The closer you walk, the more they refuse to be a single thing. They are walls within walls. They are towers placed at even spaces. They are a color somewhere between honey and old brick, and they catch the late sun in a soft, unhurried way. There is no rush in their look. They have stood here long enough that hurrying would not suit them. Other travelers move along the road with you, a man leading 2 donkeys piled high with reed mats, a small group of women carrying baskets on their heads, their voices low and almost laughing, a boy walking beside an older brother, half asleep on his feet. Nobody is in a great hurry tonight. The gate is still open. The river is close. The city, when it appears in full, is not a single sharp edge, but a slow gathering. Fields giving way to gardens, gardens to small mud brick houses, houses to walls, walls to towers, towers to that one long horizon. By the time you understand that you are nearly there, you are already almost inside. The first thing the city actually shows you up close is water, a wide, slow ribbon of it, almost still, cut into the plain in a perfect line. This is the moat. It is fed from the Euphrates itself, drawn off through carefully tended channels, kept full year round. The water carries the green smell of the river, and the small scattering of reeds at its edges. Fish move under the surface in slow, lazy circles. Frogs begin to clear their throats for the evening. A lone heron stands on one leg, perfectly patient. The moat is wider than you might expect, wide enough that crossing it on foot is not a thing one does. It is calm now, but its purpose is older than calm. Behind the moat rises the outer wall, and behind the outer wall, a little set back, a second wall, taller, thicker, brighter in color where the kiln-fired bricks face outward. Two walls, not one. Almost no other ancient city in the world arranged itself quite this way. Between the two walls is a strip of open ground, and along that strip a road for soldiers and messengers and watchmen. From here, on the dust-packed road outside, you can see only the upper edge of the inner wall, a soft, jagged line of crenellations against the sky. Travelers crossing on the bridge of beams over the moat tend to stop, even though they have seen this all before. The walls hold a kind of hush. Birds nest in the small shaded niches, swifts arriving in dark arcs as the light begins to soften. Somewhere far inside, a temple bell sounds once and then is quiet again. You walk with the others over the bridge of beams. The wood is worn smooth in the center by years of feet. The water below is dark and unhurried, and then the wall is not in the distance anymore. The wall is right here, taller than any house, and you are passing through its first great mouth. Inside the gate, a stone stair winds up to the top of the wall, and tonight a watchman lets you climb a few steps to look. The view from up here is the part the old historians could not quite stop describing. The Greek traveler Herodotus, writing more than 100 years after this evening you are walking through, said that the wall was so wide on top that a 4-horse chariot could turn around on it without touching the edge. Whether that was strict truth or a traveler's pleased exaggeration, no one is certain. But standing here, you can see why he wrote it. The walkway on the wall is broad enough for a small market. 2 carts could pass without anyone needing to slow. Watchmen pace at intervals, their footfalls almost silent on the packed brick. There is moss in the cracks where the bricks were laid earliest, and small dust-colored lizards living in those cracks. The bricks themselves are worth a slow look. The inner wall is made of 2 kinds. The core, the bulk of the wall, is sun-dried mud brick, pale, soft, the color of old bread, the kind that shapes back into earth if it is left alone for centuries. The outward face is something different. These are kiln-fired bricks, harder, denser, baked, until they ring almost like pottery, and between the layers, dark seams of bitumen, natural tar, pulled from seeps in the marshes north of the city, heated until it ran sticky and black, then poured to glue the courses together, bitumen older than the city. The smell of it, on a hot day, is faintly resinous, the smell of something the earth offered up. The making of those bricks is in this city a craft so common that almost no one notices it anymore. Out beyond the wall, on flats of riverside clay, Men work the same simple steps every day. They mix the clay with chopped reed and a little chaff to keep it from cracking as it dries. They press the mixture into wooden molds the size of a thick book. They lift the mold away. They leave the brick to bake in the sun for several days, turning it now and then so it dries evenly. The bricks for the great walls and the gates are then carried to the kilns, stacked in tall hollow towers, and fired with date pit fuel for 2 days and 2 nights. By morning the kilns smoke gently, and the bricks inside ring like cymbals. Each brick of the inner wall is stamped with the name of the king on its broad face, a small line of cuneiform pressed in by a wooden seal before the brick was fired. There are millions of such bricks in the wall under your feet, each one signed. The watchman doesn't talk much. He doesn't have to. Below, the city is beginning to glow. From up here you can see how it sits on the river, and how the river runs straight through it. The wall has 8 named gates. Each one is dedicated to a god, and each one carries that god's name, as if asking the god to keep guard. There is the Marduk gate, opening east toward the rising sun. There is the Shamash gate, named for the sun itself. There is the Adad gate of storms, the Enlil gate of wind, the Urash gate, the Zababa gate, the Sin gate, named for the moon, and the most famous of the 8, the Ishtar gate, named for the goddess of love and war and of the evening star. We come down from the wall and walk a little way along the inner road, and the Ishtar gate is not the way most ancient gates feel. Most are heavy and dark and built to forbid. This one looks instead as if a piece of the late evening sky had been brought down and shaped into a building. The whole front of it is glazed brick, the color of deep cobalt, the color of the sky a little after sundown when the first stars are about to show. And running along that cobalt are rows of low-relief figures in pale yellow and quiet white, bulls, lions, and a strange creature with the head of a snake and the feet of a lion and an eagle, called Mushushu, the dragon of Marduk. They are not fierce. They walk in steady rows, calm, almost decorative, almost asleep on the wall. The color comes from a glaze made with copper and cobalt and small careful firings. The bricks were molded one by one, numbered on the back so the masons would know how to set them in order. The whole gate is a kind of slow blue river running upward. People still pause under it tonight, the way people will keep pausing under it for thousands of years inside museum walls in cities not yet built. Past the Ishtar gate, the broad processional road runs straight into the heart of the city. We turn off it after a while, take a smaller lane, and find our way to the river. Babylon is, in a way no other great ancient capital was, a city cut in half by water. Other capitals chose a side of their river and built there. Babylon set its temples on one bank, and its houses sprawled onto both, and joined the 2 halves with a single long bridge of cedar beams resting on stone piers. The piers were wedge-shaped, set so that the river could pass on either side without being slowed too much. The wood of the bridge was taken up at night in older days and laid down again at dawn, a practical way to keep the city safe from quiet boats with bad intentions. Tonight the boards are still down. We walk halfway across and stop. The Euphrates is lower than it will be in spring, slow and dark and reflective. It carries the smell of damp reeds and clay, A small fishing skiff slides past underneath, the man inside not even looking up, his lamp barely a freckle on the dark water. On the opposite bank, lamps begin to find their windows. A potter's kiln still glows somewhere behind a wall, the orange of it pulsing softly through the gaps. A woman calls a child in for the evening meal, and the child answers, and the answer is lost in the sound of the river. There is no rush in any of this. There is only the city settling toward its night. We will leave the bridge soon. We will turn inland again and walk towards something the rest of the world, 1,000 years from now, will say was the most beautiful thing in this place, though no one walking the streets tonight will quite call it by that name. But for the moment, just stay on the bridge, listen to the river, and let the first chapter, like the day, fold gently down into the next. For now, let us step back from the bridge and turn inland. The processional way that runs from the Ishtar gate is wide enough for chariots and crowds, and once a year for a god. Tonight it is mostly empty. A few late merchants still walk it, lamps in their hands, and the bricks of the road glow back at them in the warm orange of recent sunset. We follow this road for only a little while before turning aside, because there is something nearby that almost no one will ever quite see, and almost everyone will hear about, and almost no one will agree on. To one side of the king's palace, beyond a wall of glazed brick, there are said to be gardens, not the gardens of common houses, where a few onions and a fig tree share a courtyard, not even the orchard fields outside the walls. Something else, something stepped like a small mountain, hanging in stone tiers above the city, every tier covered in green. Travelers who later wrote about this city, Greek and Roman writers who would come long after Babylon's golden evening had faded, would call them the Hanging Gardens. They would name them as one of 7 wonders of the world. They would describe terraces upon terraces, vines spilling over carved stone railings, fruit trees growing where stone was meant to be, water lifted somehow up from the river to feed all of it. And yet walking here tonight, alongside Babylonian neighbors who live their whole lives within sight of the palace, you would find something a little strange. None of them would call it that. None of them would say with a smile that we have wonders. They would not boast. They might gesture vaguely toward the palace and say there are some royal trees. They might shrug. The fame, when it comes, will come from somewhere else, in someone else's words, perhaps a long way from here. So we will walk softly tonight. We will look, and we will hold the question lightly, the way a sleeper holds a dream they are not sure they remember rightly. We come around a corner, and there it is, or there something is, a great step silhouette against the sky just beside the inner palace, with green trailing softly down its edges. From this side, in the failing light, it looks at first like a small terraced hill. Then your eye begins to read it as building, then as both at once. Each tier is a wide stone platform, supported on thick brick piers and arched vaults. On every platform, soil, deep, layered, dark, heavy enough to hold roots, and from the soil all the things that should not grow on stone. Date palms with their crowns at impossible heights, pomegranate trees in low tubs, their dark leaves shining, vines heavy with grapes, dropping in slow ropes from one tier to the next. Tamarisk and willow, their thin leaves moving in the high evening breeze. Some accounts will later say there were pines and cedars too, brought from cool mountains far to the north, kept alive here in summers that would otherwise have killed them. Stand below the lowest terrace and look up. Water is moving somewhere. You can hear it. Not a fountain, exactly. More like a slow, repeated turning, a wooden creak, the kind of sound a mill might make in the deep distance. The air directly under the gardens is cooler than the air on the other side of the wall, almost 10 degrees cooler on a hot day. The leaves drip a fine mist when the high tier is freshly watered. Small frogs make small noises in pots that are not theirs. Somewhere up there, a gardener is finishing the last circuit of the evening, walking from corner to corner with a small bronze can. He cannot see you, and you cannot quite see him, but you can hear his footsteps, soft, tired, content. Now here is the strange thing about these gardens. We are walking under them tonight, and they feel as solid as the wall behind your back. And yet, when you look for them in the records the Babylonians themselves left behind, in the great rooms of clay tablets that survive from Nebuchadnezzar's reign, you do not find them. The king kept careful records. He listed his palaces. He listed the gates he restored, the walls he rebuilt, the temples he glazed in blue and gold. He inscribed his works in long, proud cuneiform, on bricks and on cylinders, and on the foundations of his buildings, so that the gods would know, and his successors would know. Almost nothing is too small to mention. He even speaks of small chapels and minor restorations. But of this stepped mountain of green beside the palace, of these famous hanging gardens, in his own words, there is nothing, not a clear line, not a single tablet that says, "Here in this district of the city, I built terraces and planted them." The silence in the records is, in its way, almost as remarkable as the gardens themselves. Now there is still tonight, in this city, plenty of green spaces, royal orchards, courtyard gardens, trees in tubs on the palace roof. We can see them in the upper windows where lamps are flickering. Some of these certainly existed. The question is only whether the great stepped wonder was here, or whether the later writers who named it, most of whom never set foot in this city, were looking at smaller royal gardens and stretching them, in retelling, into something taller. Babylon was already, even by then, a name that grew larger in the imagination than on the ground. Travelers wanted to find marvels here, so they did. Whether the gardens stood as later writers described, or whether they were a softer, smaller thing, sleep can hold both possibilities for one quiet hour without strain. Still, there is a story attached to the gardens that has stayed with them, and it is the story most often told. The story goes like this. Nebuchadnezzar, the king who built so much of the Babylon we are walking through, married a woman named Euphrates, the daughter of the king of the Medes, far to the north and east. Her country was a country of mountains, of cool slopes, of pine and oak, and small streams running over stones. When she came down to live in Babylon, flat, hot, dust-colored Babylon, with its long brown river and its level fields, she missed her green hills. The story says she ached for them, And so the king, the story says, ordered something to be built that would bring the mountains to a whole made hill of green, terraced like a hillside, full of every cool loving plant they could keep alive in this climate, a homemade homeland, a garden that was, in a quiet way, a love letter. Whether this is the true reason, or a beautiful story added later, no one now is certain. The Babylonians did not write it down. The Greeks did, but centuries afterward, and Greeks were always finding love stories behind monuments. What is true, though, is that Babylon's queens and Babylon's princesses often did come from far places, Media, Elam, Egypt, the lands beyond the Tigris, and it is not strange to imagine that one of them, lying in a bed too far from her own country, woke one morning to find a small terrace of mountain plants growing right outside her window. Whether the rest of the legend grew from a kindness like that, or from something larger, no one can say. The kindness, at least, is plausible. There is one more thing worth saying about these gardens, very softly, before we move on. In the centuries after Babylon faded, scholars hunting for the lost wonder began to dig in the soil where it should have been. They dug carefully, layer by layer, in the area beside the king's palace where the old descriptions placed it. And, oddly, they did not find what they expected. The brick foundations of step terraces of that scale did not turn up. The waterworks that should have lifted river water 70 or 80 feet into the air left no clear trace. So a quieter idea began to grow among certain modern scholars. Perhaps the great hanging garden of legend was not in fact in this city at all. Perhaps it was up north, in a city called Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrian kings, where another ruler, Sennacherib, 100 years before Nebuchadnezzar, had famously built terraced gardens beside his own palace, fed by long stone aqueducts. Sennacherib even left inscriptions describing them. The inscriptions go further than that. They describe a way of raising water from a stream into the gardens that he called, in his own words, a screw of bronze, a long spiral mechanism turned by hand at the lower end that lifted water up its body in a continuous slow flow. If those inscriptions are read straight, they would mean that the device we now call the Archimedes screw was already in use at Nineveh more than 400 years before Archimedes was born. The Babylonians, in any case, knew very well how to lift river water. Smaller orchards along the Euphrates have long used a counterweighted lever called a shadoof, a simple long pole with a bucket on one end and a clay weight on the other, dipping water out of the river one swing at a time, all day. The water for any tall garden in this region, however it was lifted, would have come up the same gentle way the river did everything, slowly, repeatedly, through patient hands. The argument then goes that Greek travelers, generations later, mixed the two great Mesopotamian capitals together, and the gardens of Nineveh, slowly in retelling, drifted south and became the gardens of Babylon. We do not have to decide tonight which version is right. Both are old, both are quiet, both involve a king who loved trees and a wife from somewhere greener, and we are standing in our minds under terraces that may or may not have stood here at all, listening to water that is half water and half story. We will leave the gardens now. The lamps in the palace are coming on softly behind drawn screens. Somewhere not far from here, a young man is sitting cross-legged in a small courtyard, pressing reed into wet clay, copying lines he was set this morning. Let us turn now, gently, toward him. The gardens, real or remembered, can keep their own counsel. We turn from the gardens, real or imagined, and walk a few quiet streets inland. The lanes here are narrow, the kind a single donkey can fit through, but not two. The walls on either side are smooth mud plaster, broken at intervals by low arched doorways. Behind those doorways, courtyards. Behind the courtyards, lives. We stop at one of them because a soft, peculiar sound is coming out of it. A small, dry, rhythmic ticking, many tickings, slightly out of step, almost like a small flock of crickets warming up. It is the sound of reed pressed into clay. This is one of the city's tablet houses. The Babylonians called it the Edubba, which means, very simply, the house of tablets. It is a school. Inside the courtyard, in the last good light of the day, a dozen boys are sitting cross-legged on woven mats. Each one holds a small flat slab of damp clay across his lap. Each one holds in his other hand a thin, neatly cut length of reed, sharpened at one end into a small wedge tip. They are pressing the wedges into the clay in careful, repeated patterns. They are copying lines. Some have done this for years, and their tablets are clean and even. Some are new, and their tablets are smudged where their fingers have rested too long. A teacher walks slowly between the rows. He carries his own tablet, on which the day's lesson is written. He does not raise his voice. He bends sometimes to set a boy's hand at a different angle, or to nudge the angle of a stylus by a fraction. A boy gets a sign wrong, sees it, smiles a small embarrassed smile, and presses his fingertip flat onto the clay. The wrong sign disappears. The clay smooths over again, ready to be tried a second time. There is no shouting in this school tonight. There is only the soft tick of stylus, and the soft thump of fingertip, and the long evening light coming sideways across a row of bent heads. Move closer to one of the boys. Let yourself look over his shoulder. The clay he is holding is the color of damp brown earth, slightly darker where his hand has warmed it. It is shaped into a small flat pillow, perhaps the size of a folded piece of cloth, slightly thicker in the middle. He has dipped the heel of his hand in a little water, smoothed the surface, and begun his lines from the upper left corner. The signs he is making are not letters. They are not pictures either, though some of them began long ago as pictures. They are wedges. Each one is a small impressed shape, a triangular print left by the corner of his stylus, and the signs are made by combining wedges in different directions and counts. 3 pressed downward, 2 pressed sideways, 1 small angled wedge tucked under the others. The whole script is built from this one shape, repeated, rotated, layered. That is why we call it cuneiform, from a Latin word for wedge. From a small distance, his lines look like rows of little bird tracks. Up close, they look like organized weather. The reed stylus itself is older than the city. Its design has hardly changed in 2,000 years. The boy chose his this morning from a small bundle near the door. He cut the tip himself, with care, because a bad tip makes a bad wedge. When his hand tires, he sets the stylus aside, flexes his fingers, and waits a slow moment. The clay does not mind waiting. As long as it stays a little damp, he can keep going. If it starts to dry too quickly, he can lift a small linen rag from the bowl beside him and lay it briefly over the surface. The clay drinks back the water. The signs hold. He picks up the stylus and begins again. What does the boy copy this evening? Most likely the same things every scribe boy in this city has copied for generations. Lists, long, careful lists, names of trees, names of stones, names of fishes in the river, names of gods in their proper order with their proper titles. The Babylonians loved lists. They believed that to know the right name of a thing was to begin gently to know the thing itself, so they listed everything they could find. Beyond the lists, in older years he will copy proverbs, short, dry, slightly funny lines that have been passed down for centuries. Things like, "The poor man does not strike his son, he saves him for the future," or, "Into an open mouth a fly will fly," sayings the children memorize without quite understanding until one day they do. There are also jokes. The Babylonians, like every people in every age, enjoy a small joke at the end of a long lesson. Some of these jokes, written down, copied, kept on tablets, dug up thousands of years later, are among the oldest jokes in the world. There is one small Sumerian one, much older even than this city, in which a young woman and her husband sit together at the end of an evening, and the woman remarks, very dryly, that something has happened that has never happened in the history of the world before. "Of course it has," the husband says. "No," says the wife, "the first such thing the world has ever seen." He is unconvinced. The joke in its old wedge marks is dry and small and slightly cruel, the way many old jokes are. The boys in the courtyard laugh at it the way boys laugh at any joke involving married people, which is to say briefly, and without quite understanding why. He will copy small portions of stories too, maybe a few lines from the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is already in this city, a story so old that most of the boys in this courtyard know it by heart. He may copy a hymn to a god. He may copy mathematical exercises, a small farm field divided unevenly between two brothers, and a question about who owes whom what. The tablets he makes tonight will, most of them, never be fired in a kiln. They are practice tablets. By tomorrow, when the lesson is finished, he will press his hand flat across the surface, smear it back into wet earth, and shape it again into a fresh pillow for the next lesson. The clay, like a slate, lives in cycles. The boys go home. The tablets dissolve back into themselves. Only certain tablets, a finished letter, a temple record, a contract, a story copied for a teacher's reference, are taken to the kiln, baked once, and then turned by fire into something that will outlast everyone in this room by thousands of years. Now imagine just for a moment that one of those fired tablets is in another room of the city tonight, not in this school, but in a quieter, older shelf, in the home of a slightly grumpy merchant. It is a letter. It was sent to him from another merchant who was, by all accounts, his most regular customer, and who had finally lost his patience. The letter is addressed to a man named Nasir, a copper trader who lived in the older Mesopotamian city of generations before Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon. The letter is from a man named Nani, who is not happy. Nani has paid in advance for fine copper, and the copper, when it finally arrived, was not fine at all. It was poor quality, badly weighed, late, and delivered with what Nani felt was a great deal of arrogance. So Nani sat down, took up a clean clay tablet, and dictated his complaint, line by careful line, in the small wedge marks of cuneiform. He told Inacia how disappointed he was. He reminded him that he, Nani, had always been a respectful customer. He said that the man who had been sent with the copper had spoken rudely to him in front of his servants. He demanded full compensation. He hoped that future dealings would be on better terms, but only just. The tablet was fired, sent across the river, and somehow, through luck and the great slow forgetfulness of cities, it survived. Today, in a museum many empires later, scholars sometimes call it the world's oldest surviving customer complaint, a small, perfect, weary letter written in mud by a man who only wanted decent copper. The boys in our courtyard will never see this tablet. They are too young, and it is already too old, but they will in their lives write hundreds of letters that will look very much like it. Annoyed letters, polite letters, letters about debts and weddings, letters about a cousin who is not visited in too long, each one pressed into damp earth in the same small wedges by the same small reeds. There is one more tablet worth thinking about tonight before we move on. Somewhere in this city, perhaps in the back room of a private scholar's house, perhaps already in a temple library, there is a small clay tablet covered in numbers, just numbers, in 15 rows and 4 columns. To anyone who could not read cuneiform, it would look like a small pattern of damp wedges. To anyone who could, it is something quietly astonishing. The tablet, which much later scholars would call by a museum number, lists triples of whole numbers that obey what we now call the Pythagorean rule, 3 numbers A, B, and C, where 2 of them squared add up to the third one squared, triangles whose sides come out neatly. The Greek philosopher Pythagoras, who is often given credit for this rule, will not be born for more than 1,000 years. By the time he is born, this tablet will already be ancient. The Babylonians did not call it Pythagoras. They did not call it anything dramatic. They simply knew it. It was for them a tool of land surveying, of building, of dividing fields and measuring foundations. It is one of those quiet facts about this city that is easy to underestimate. The men who pressed wedges into clay here were, among themselves, doing mathematics that the wider world would lose, rediscover, and applaud all over again 2,000 years later. They were also weighing copper, drafting marriage contracts, listing the names of fishes. So the school empties slowly. The boys put away their tablets. The teacher rolls up his lesson and tucks it under his arm. Lamps are lit in the doorway. Somewhere in the next street, a baker is closing his oven for the night, but somewhere else, a brewer is just beginning to scoop barley mash into wide clay vats. The smell of yeast is starting to drift through the lanes. Let us follow it for a while. The lane bends and opens, suddenly, into a small market square. It is the end of the day. Most of the trading is over, but the smell is everywhere. Layered, slow, comforting, warm bread, crushed dates, smoke from small reed fires, fish drying on flat stones, and underneath all of it, the soft, sour, sweet scent of fermenting barley. Stalls line the edges of the square, most of them now in the process of closing for the night. A baker is setting his last loaves into a covered basket. Small, round, dense loaves the size of a fist, the color of oat. A woman sells pressed cakes of dates, sticky, dark as honeyed wood, wrapped in bits of palm leaf. An old man with thin shoulders is folding away the linen sheet on which he had, all afternoon, displayed onions in long, neat rows. A boy sweeps the dust into a small pile, and then, distracted by something only he can see, leaves the pile sitting in the middle of the path. Beyond the food stalls, smaller tables hold weights and measures, small bronze pans, sets of standardized stones. People came here all day to weigh out goods against silver. There were no coins yet in this market. Coins as a way to carry value will only be invented far to the west, in a country called Lydia, generations from this evening. So in Babylon, value travels in weighed metal, a small piece of silver shaved against a known weight. A merchant's nodded approval, a pinch of salt in the pan to make up the last fraction. The whole rhythm of trade is calm, ritualized, slow as the river. Nobody hurries, nobody shouts. The day is folding itself away. In one corner of the market, behind a low wall, a small open courtyard glows softly with the orange of low fires. This is one of the city's many breweries. The Babylonians make beer the way they have always made beer in this part of the world, by the 1,000 jugs, every day, in almost every neighborhood. Most of these breweries are run by women. Brewing is a household trade, an ancestral craft, often passed from mother to daughter. The patron deity of beer in this city is herself a goddess. Her name is Ninkasi. There is a hymn to her, taught in many homes, that reads almost like a recipe, walking through the steps of her craft, line by line. Ninkasi, you who soak the malt in a jar. Ninkasi, you who spread the cooked mash on great reed mats. Ninkasi, you who hold the sweet wort with 2 hands. Tonight, in this courtyard, 2 women in simple robes are doing exactly what the hymn describes. One stirs a wide clay vat with a long wooden paddle. The other lifts a fine cloth filter from the rim of a smaller pot. The mash bubbles slowly. It smells of warm bread and cut grass. The smaller children of the household sit on the courtyard's edge, watching, half asleep, their bare feet drawn up under them. A black and white kitten naps on a folded sack. The whole scene is so domestic, so unhurried, that it is hard to remember that this small backyard work is also one of the engines of the city's economy. Beer is not a luxury here. Beer is a wage. Beer is in many official tablets, written down side by side with bread, as though the two were the same kind of thing. A worker at the city's docks, or a brickmaker out at the kilns, or a laborer carrying baskets of mud brick to the wall. will be paid every day in a portion of bread and a portion of beer. The standard for many crews is something like 2 flat loaves and 2 jugs of beer given out at the end of the day. For senior craftsmen, more. For temple workers, special allotments measured in fine cuneiform on a clerk's tablet. The amounts are calculated, the jugs are sealed, the bread is counted. Beer is in this city a calorie. It is a way of giving back to a working body the strength it spent. So as evening comes, all over Babylon, jugs of beer are being uncovered. And here is one small charming thing about the way it is drunk. The beer is not strained finely. It is brewed in a way that leaves bits of barley husk and yeast floating on top, so drinking it from the lip of the jug would mean drinking through the floating bits. The Babylonians solved this elegantly long ago. They drink their beer through long reed straws, sometimes very long ones, 3 feet or more, when several drinkers share one wide pot. Sometimes shorter ones, when a man drinks his evening jug alone. Pictures of this, small carved scenes on cylinder seals, only the size of a thumbnail, show people seated around a single deep pot, each with their own slim reed reaching down past the foam to the cleaner liquid below. It is the kind of detail that makes the past feel suddenly familiar. People sharing one bowl, leaning toward it, saying small things to each other. The straw, of course, is just a hollow reed cut from the riverbank that very morning, used once, discarded, replaced tomorrow. The river gives them straws the way it gives them everything else. There is one more old thing about beer in this part of the world worth mentioning, very softly. More than 1,000 years before this evening, in the older Mesopotamian city under an earlier king named Hammurabi, beer houses were already so much a part of life that the kingdom wrote laws about them. Some of those laws still survive on a great stone column. They say in essence that a beer house keeper who waters her beer in dishonest measure shall be thrown into the river. They say that a beer house keeper who allows criminals to plot in her tavern and who does not bring them in shall be put to death. They say, almost as an afterthought, that priestesses, by their vows, must not enter a beer house at all, on pain of severe penalty. The beer houses of those older days were almost always run by women, and the laws read like a careful, slightly weary attempt to keep the trade honest. The beer houses of this Babylon, generations later, are gentler places. The laws have softened with use. The keepers still water the beer occasionally. The keepers still know everyone's business. The keepers still close their doors at the same patient hour each night, just before the watchmen call the second gong. And in the small kitchens behind the beer houses, a slow stew is often left simmering, Euphrates fish poached with onion and leek and a pinch of salt, ladled out into shallow clay bowls, eaten with a torn piece of bread by men who have worked all day on the wall. Move out of the brewery yard now and walk a few steps. There is, almost everywhere in this city, a date palms in private courtyards, date palms in temple groves, long ordered date plantations outside the walls, arranged in ranks like a thinking army of trees. The date palm in Babylon is more than a fruit tree. The Babylonians have a saying, recorded in their texts that the palm has 365 uses, one for every day of the year. Not all of these uses survive in the records, and some of the surviving lists overlap, and the number itself is half poetry. But it points at a real truth. The dates themselves are food. They are eaten fresh, dried into stiff slabs, pressed into honeyed cakes, fermented into a date wine. The pits, ground, become animal feed. The fronds, dried, become baskets, mats, fans, roofing thatch, the floor of a child's bed. The trunks become beams in small houses. The fiber at the base of the leaves is twisted into rope. The flowering spathes, before they open, are tapped for a sweet sap that becomes another kind of wine. The bark is fuel. The young hearts of certain trees, carefully cut, are eaten as a delicate vegetable. Dates are exported up and down the river, given as wages, used in temple offerings, made into syrup that sweetens almost everything. A wealthy household measures its security in the number of mature palms in its orchard. A poor man, with a single tree of his own, considers himself, in a quiet way, a property owner. The palms keep their own slow calendar. They are pollinated by hand in early spring by climbers who go up the trunks with small bags of pollen. They are harvested in late summer. The work moves slowly, year after year, generation after generation. By the time you are walking under one of them tonight, the tree above you is probably older than the king. And so, having gone through the market and through the brewery and under the date palms, we have nearly walked through the whole quiet economy of this city. The last piece of it, the one that runs invisibly through everything we have seen tonight, is the small standard weight by which value gets agreed. The Babylonians use a weight called the shekel. A shekel is just that, a weight, not a coin, not a piece of stamped metal with a king's face on it. A shekel of silver is a small, exact, agreed lump of metal, weighed in a bronze pan against a known stone of the proper mass. A shekel of grain is a similar fixed amount of barley. A wage might be expressed in shekels. A debt might, a bride price, a temple offering, a fine for a damaged wall. The shekel is everywhere, the way a quiet ruler is everywhere. It does not need to be loud to be obeyed. The man at the stall closes his small set of weights into a leather pouch. He pulls the cloth over his stall. The lamp at his corner of the square is gently snuffed. Across the square, the last bread loaf goes home in a basket. The kitten in the brewery yard turns over and resettles, and the smell of yeast and dates and faint river smoke is starting to be replaced, very slowly, by the smell of evening, wood fires inside small houses, warm dust, the breath of donkeys in their stalls, the river going quiet for the night. Let us follow that breath toward the animals now. There are smaller lives in this city we have not yet visited. Lions on a wall, a heron at the water's edge, a house dog asleep across a doorway, a gecko on a shaded plaster. The city, when it is half asleep, belongs to them just as much as to anyone. So let us leave the market and turn very softly toward them. We leave the market behind us. The last lamps in the stores are going out one by one, and the square is settling into its dusty quiet. Take a few slow steps. The lane narrows again, and the smells change. Not yeast and dates anymore. Now there are warmer animal smells, straw, breath, the thick, patient warmth of stalls where animals have been kept all day. This part of the city, like every part, has its share of small lives. Behind a low wooden gate, 3 donkeys stand in a row in a covered stall, their heads low, their long ears moving lazily at every small sound. They have spent the day hauling reed mats and brick and grain, and they are content now to be still. A boy comes out with a bucket of crushed straw and sets it inside the stall, says a soft, complicated thing to the lead donkey, and stays for a moment with his hand on the donkey's neck. A goat in the next stall over pretends not to be watching. There are small songs being sung in this neighborhood, not formal hymns, just the quiet humming of evening, the kind people do when they have stopped paying attention to themselves. A woman somewhere is grinding the last grain of the day on a small stone. The rhythm of it, faint and steady, almost like a slow heart. A lamb in a far courtyard answers another lamb across the lane. A door closes softly. Babylon in this hour is full of these soft animal and human sounds. They do not call for any of your attention, and that is exactly why they are restful. You can hear the donkey's breath. You can hear the small bell on the goat's collar. You can hear the sparrows settling very high above in the crowns of the date palms that line the courtyard walls. Even the wind at this hour seems to have small feet. Now move into one of the courtyards gently. The household has eaten. A small clay bowl of leftover bread sits on a low ledge. A dog is asleep across the doorway, his back rising and falling softly. The Babylonians call dogs by a word that simply means dog, ugi, and there are many of them in the city, both indoor companions and street dogs that drift between courtyards, being fed by everyone and owned by no one. The sleeping dog here belongs to the family. He is not large. He is a kind of long-bodied, calm, watchful dog, the color of warm sand. He twitches one ear when you mentally step over him and goes back to sleep. On the wall above him, very still, a small gecko is waiting for moths. The Babylonians have a word for gecko too, kulmitu, and the geckos here are thought, in some old beliefs, to be small spirits of the household, allowed to live on the walls in exchange for hunting whatever crawls. They are pale, a translucent color, almost the color of the plaster itself. When the lamp moves, their eyes catch a tiny flash of orange, and then they vanish into a crack and reappear 2 feet away. In the date palm in the corner of the courtyard, sparrows are settling for the night. They make small fussing sounds as they argue with each other for the better twigs. Above them, against the indigo sky, a few bats are still working. Mesopotamia has its bats, swift and small, and on a warm night there is always a bat above any courtyard you stand in. Down by the wall, a black beetle is patiently inspecting a crack. None of these creatures is loud. None of them is in the way. The evening would feel somehow less complete without them. There are, by this evening, also small cats in the city. The cat is, in this part of the world, a relatively new arrival, a soft import from Egypt, where a different kind of small spotted cat had long lived in temples and grain stores. Babylonian merchants, generations back, brought a few of them home up the river, and the cats settled in quickly. They keep mice off the grain. They sleep by preference on warm bricks above the ovens. The cat in this courtyard is a small grey thing, nearly invisible against a clay pot, and is currently watching with great seriousness a moth that has not yet noticed her. Whether she catches it or not, no one will ever know. There is one creature that does not live in the courtyards, but lives instead even now on the open plain beyond the walls, out where the irrigation ends and the dust begins, in scrub and in long grass and in the low patches of tamarisk by the river. There are still, in this evening, lions, real lions. The Asian lion, slightly smaller than the African, lighter with a thinner mane, once roamed the whole sweep of land from western India to the edges of Greece. Mesopotamia is part of its native range, and the open country around Babylon is one of its quieter homes. Most nights the city's people will never see one, but farmers near the orchards know to keep their flocks close. Shepherds carry slings. There are old stories in this city of lions walking through abandoned villages after long droughts, and of farmers waking to find a single set of paw prints around a sheep pen with the gate undisturbed. The kings of the cities of this region have made the lion into something more than an animal. Lion hunts are royal rituals. The king, dressed in fine cloth, stands in a chariot and shoots arrows at lions released from cages, sometimes lions caught in nets and brought to be hunted. It is a ceremony partly of order. The king kills the lion to show that the land is held against chaos. Long carved relief panels in older Assyrian palaces far north of here show this rite again and again. Some of those carvings, generations from now, will be among the most admired ancient art in the world. The lions in the carvings are tired and brave and oddly individual, each one drawn with care. And then there are the lions on the Ishtar gate, the lions you walked past at the start of this evening, glazed in pale gold against the cobalt sky. They are not the same as the living lions on the plain. They are a softer, calmer, eternal version of them, walking quietly along the wall as if they had agreed to keep watch. Real lion, painted lion, both, tonight, are part of the city. Of all the animals in this city, though, the one that gets the most done in any given day is not the lion, or the dog, or the goat. It is the donkey. Babylonian carts, Babylonian baskets, Babylonian heavy lifts of every kind are pulled and carried on donkey backs. Horses exist here. Horses are kept by the army. Horses appear in royal processions, but for the daily work of the city, for the brickyards, the markets, the temple grain stores, the long supply lines coming in from the countryside, donkeys are the engine. There are a few good reasons for this. Donkeys are sturdier than horses on poor feed. They drink less water in this hot climate. They are calmer in narrow lanes, and they are by nature surer-footed on uneven ground. A horse set down on the kind of brick ramp leading up to a city gate will pick its way with care. A donkey will simply walk. They are also cheaper to keep, and they live a long time. In the brickyards north of the wall, you can see them now in their evening rest, 10 or 20 in a yard, standing in loose groups, the tips of their ears moving softly. The drivers feed them straw and crushed barley. Some of the older drivers will pat their best donkey on the neck, the way a sailor might touch the rail of his own boat. Inside the city, the smaller donkeys move through the lanes in 2s and 3s, their hooves making a soft, padded sound on the brick. Often a child rides on top of a load, half asleep, leaning into the warm side of the animal. The donkey does not seem to mind. Donkeys, in many ways, are the secret keepers of this city's economy. Without them, very little of what we have walked past tonight could have reached the place where we found it. The bricks of the wall, the dates in the market, the jugs of beer, all of it has been on a donkey's back at some point. The donkey, however, is rarely thanked in tablets. The donkey simply goes, "Let us walk back, finally, to the river before this chapter ends." The Euphrates at this hour is dark and slow. A few small fishing skiffs drift along the edge, men in them holding short throw nets folded over their forearms, ready to cast. The river here gives up several kinds of fish. The most common is a long, thick-shouldered fish, a kind of Mesopotamian carp, silver in the lamplight, heavy in the hand. There are smaller fish too, and eels in the deeper still parts, and freshwater shrimp in the reeds. Most of what is caught tonight will not make it to a household table fresh. Instead, the fishermen will take their catch a little way down the bank to a small reed fire that has been burning low since evening. There they will lay the cleaned fish out on flat stones over the smoke and let them dry slowly through the night. By tomorrow the fish will be stiff, dark, faintly sweet, and easy to keep. A winter food, a journey food, a food for a poor day. Some of it will be sold in the market we just left. Some will be tied in palm leaf bundles and traded upriver to villages without good fishing. The fire crackles softly. The smell drifts down the bank. A boy near the fire is half asleep, his chin on his knees, watching the smoke decide which way to go. Somewhere in the dark above, a single bat passes. The river runs on, as it has for thousands of years, and as it will, more or less unchanged, for thousands more. So the chapter of the small lives is folding down. The donkeys are settling. The dogs are dreaming the dreams dogs dream. The geckos are still on the walls, watching for moths. And somewhere far above all of this, on the highest stage of a great brick tower we have not yet visited tonight, a single priest is bending over a damp tablet, looking up at the stars. Let us climb very slowly toward him. The lanes lead inward, and inward again, toward the center of the city. The houses fall away. The ground begins, almost imperceptibly, to rise. We come around one last corner, and there it is, larger than anything we have seen tonight, larger than the eye is quite ready to read at first. A great 7-tiered tower of dark glazed brick, set on a wide square base, climbing upward in stepped stages so smoothly that even at this distance you can count the levels. This is the ziggurat, the great temple tower of Babylon. We will say more about this tower in a later chapter because it has its own evening to itself. For now, lift your eyes only to its highest stage. There is a small platform there, almost lost against the night sky, and on that platform, faint as a single candle on a far hill, the orange glow of an oil lamp. Up there, as on every clear night in this city, a priest is at work. He is one of a small group of men whose evenings are spent watching the sky. He has a small clay tablet across his knees, a reed stylus in his hand, a jug of water at his side, kept covered against dust. He has been at his place since just before sunset, when the first stars began to show. He works very slowly. Every time a planet moves a hand-width along the night, he marks it. Every time the moon clears a bright star, he writes. The Babylonians do not separate astronomy from astrology the way we now sometimes do. To them, the movement of the sky is one continuous, careful conversation between the gods and the world. Tracking it is a sacred craft. Predicting it when possible is even more sacred. So night after night, generation after generation, the priests of this city have been writing the sky onto wet clay and firing the most important tablets to keep them. By Nebuchadnezzar's day, this has been going on for the better part of 1,000 years. The priests have, over those generations, written down on tablets a great list of stars and constellations. The list bears a name in cuneiform that begins with the sign for plough, MULRPN, scholars now call it. It is in essence a star catalogue. Each constellation is named, given a season in which it rises, and matched to a god. Many of the names are familiar in their bones to a modern listener: the bull, the lion, the twins, the scales, because the Greeks much later will borrow them, and Europe will borrow them again from the Greeks, and so on. A boy reading the night sky in a far country 2,500 years from now will be reading, without quite knowing it, a list first written in this city. There is something quietly remarkable about the way the priest writes the sky. He does not, as we now do, count the sky in tens. He counts in sixties. The Babylonian number system is built around the number 60. They have a sign for 1, they have a sign for 10, and they group everything into sixties, the way we group into hundreds. To them, 60 is a friendly, deep, well-behaved number. It can be divided cleanly by 2, by 3, by 4, by 5, by 6, by 10, by 12, by 15, by 20, by 30. Almost any way you cut it, 60 hands you back a whole number. For a culture that spends a great deal of its time dividing fields, dividing inheritances, dividing the night, this is not a small thing. So the priest counts the night in sixties. He divides each hour into 60 smaller pieces. He divides each of those into 60 smaller still. He divides the great circle of the sky into 360 degrees, 6 times 60. And here is the small wonder of it. We still do this. Right now, in any city in the world, when someone says it is 6:20, the 20 means 20 out of 60, and they do not think about why. When a sailor takes a bearing in degrees, The 360 of his compass is a Babylonian habit. When a watchmaker sets a second hand to tick 60 times a minute, 60 times an hour, the system is 2,500 years old, written down for the first time in clay tablets in this very city, and never given up. The priest, of course, does not know any of this. He simply knows that the night is divided into the proper portions, and that the gods like a careful count. He writes another wedge into the clay. The night moves on by a small fraction. The number quietly survives him. Now there is one piece of the priest's work that is harder than the rest, and one piece that has cost his order generations to learn. That is the prediction of eclipses. To the Babylonians, an eclipse, especially a lunar eclipse, is one of the most serious omens the sky can deliver. When the moon goes dark, the gods are speaking, and what they are saying is rarely good news for kings. So the city has, for many lifetimes, kept very careful records of every lunar eclipse it has seen, date after date, written in cuneiform, lined up in long lists, kept in temple libraries, and from those long lists, over time, the priests began to notice something. The eclipses came back, not at random, in a pattern. About every 18 years, the same pattern of eclipses repeated itself, almost exactly, with a small shift in time and place. The Babylonians did not know why. They did not know about the geometry of the moon's orbit, or the slow drift of its nodes. They did not need to. What they had instead was the pattern itself. They could look at their lists, count the right number of years, and say with some confidence, an eclipse will fall in this month, of this kind, in this approximate hour. Modern astronomers much later will name this the Saros cycle. They will, in fact, find that the Babylonian observations are, in some places, the oldest reliable astronomical records in the world, and that they help calibrate even our own modern understanding of the sky. So tonight, while we walk under the great tower somewhere not far above us, a man is reading a list, comparing it to a smaller list, and noting on a small clay tablet that, perhaps in 2 months, on a particular night, the moon may briefly turn the color of dark wine. He does not know that we are listening. He cannot. But the patience of his work is one of the small, calm wonders of this city. We have spoken of the priests above. Let us also speak very briefly of the workers below. Babylon does not float as the gardens did on the imagination. It floats more truly on its canals. The fields outside the walls, every field of barley and emmer and date and onion that has fed every meal we have walked past tonight, depend almost entirely on water carried out from the Euphrates by long, careful canals. Some of the great canals are wider than streets. Some of the small ditches are no wider than a man's arm. Together they form a quiet woven network that keeps the city alive. None of them maintain themselves. Every year the silt of the river fills the canals up. Every year the salt of the desert seeps in and would untreated kill the fields. Every year men go out in long organized groups with baskets and hoes and reed mats and spades and clean the canals from end to end. This work is shared by ancient agreement among all the families of the city and the surrounding villages. A certain number of days of labor each year, owed by every household, given to the upkeep of the water. The Babylonians have a particular word for it, and a particular bookkeeping. The temple clerks track it on long clay tablets, neighborhood by neighborhood. If a man cannot work, if he is sick, or old, or away on trade, he can sometimes pay another man to take his days. The work is hard, it is hot, it is not glamorous. It is also the most important work the city does. In the evening, when the canal crews come back into the city, you can pick them out by the dust on their legs and the slow, satisfied tiredness in their walk. They are usually quiet. They are usually fed well that night, by gratitude as much as by custom. The waters that they have just kept moving will in a few months become the next harvest, the next bread, the next jug of beer, the next quiet evening in the next quiet courtyard. There is one more invisible system worth a word tonight. As you walked through the lanes, you may have noticed, in some places, a soft, constant glow at certain corners, almost like a small, low candle that never blew out. Those are not candles. They are not oil lamps in the usual sense. They are small basins, recessed into the wall or set into a clay pot, in which a dark, slow oil burns through the night. The oil comes from places north of the city, where in certain marshes a black, slightly oily, slightly resinous substance seeps up from the ground all by itself. It is the same family of substance as the bitumen that holds the city's bricks together. The Babylonians call it by various names. We will, in much later centuries, call it naphtha. They have learned that properly handled, it burns cleanly enough to give a soft, constant light. So a few of the broader corners of the city, the gates, the bridge, the edge of the great square in front of the king's palace, keep small basins of naphtha burning low through the night. They do not light the streets brightly, they simply mark the corners. Travelers crossing town in the dark can find their way by them. Watchmen on the walls can see, far below where the city's heart lies. Most lanes are still dark. Most houses still close their shutters at sunset, but here and there a small steady fire keeps watch. Above all of this, the great ziggurat tower stands almost black against the stars, and the priest on its top stage continues, slowly, to count. Below, the people of the city are beginning to retreat into their houses. We will follow them now. The next chapter of the night is a small one, the inside of a single home, a doorway, a demon at the doorway, a small shrine in the corner, the way a Babylonian household, at the end of any day, quietly settles itself for sleep. So we come back down from the great tower in our minds and walk softly into a small lane in a quieter part of the city. We choose a house almost at random, a low, plain mud brick house with a single arched doorway and a small window cut high in the wall. The door is closed for the night, but we can pass through the way one passes through anything in a story without disturbing what is inside. Above the doorway, just inside the lintel where most visitors would not notice it, there is a small clay figure no larger than a hand. The figure is not pretty. It has the body of a small hunched man, the wings of a bird, the claws of a lion, and a face that is frankly ugly, with bared teeth, bulging eyes, and a long, somewhat alarming snout. This is Pazuzu. He is a demon. The Babylonians know perfectly well that he is a demon. They put him over their doors anyway, because Pazuzu, as demons go, is a very particular kind. He is, in their stories, the demon who keeps away worse demons. The worst of those, in this city's nightmares, is named Lamashtur. Lamashtur is the demon, especially feared by mothers, who is said to come into the houses of newborns and make them sicken. So in the homes of any family with small children, and there are many in this city, a small Pazuzu figurine is kept above the doorway, or on a shelf inside, or sometimes worn on a cord around a baby's neck. The reasoning is sweetly direct. Lamashtu is afraid of Pazuzu. Pazuzu, ugly and wing-clawed, is on our side. Therefore the doorway is held. The little figure in this house has been here for years. A small line of black has formed at the top of his snout, where the family has touched him for luck on bad days. He is, in his odd way, beloved. He stands his guard. The household enters its evening. Inside the house, in the corner of the main room, a small shrine has been set up. It is not large, a flat shelf of pale plaster, painted a faded ochre. On it, 3 small clay figurines, household gods, ancestors, the family's own private patrons. Beside them a small lamp shaped like a leaf, kept lit through the night. In front of them a small bowl of bread, a small bowl of beer, a pinch of incense in a clay dish that is gently smoking. The Babylonians do not separate the gods of the city from the gods of the house. The great gods, Marduk, Ishtar, Sin the moon, Shamash the sun, live in their own temples and have their own priests. But every household, every single household, also has its own smaller gods. They are not exactly idols. They are something more like remembered presences. Some are inherited from grandparents. Some have come into the family through marriage. The figurines themselves are sometimes very old, repaired with bitumen where they have cracked, holding the soft, worn shine of having been touched a great many times. Each evening, the woman of the house, usually the eldest, sometimes the youngest if the elders are away, comes to the shrine, lights the leaf lamp, sets out the small offerings, and stands for a moment in silence. She does not always pray with words. The household gods, by long custom, do not require speech. They are kept, and in turn they keep. After the offerings, the family eats. Whatever is left in the bowls is collected the next morning and given, very quietly, to the household dog or to a passing beggar. In this way the gods receive what they like, the family receives what they need, and a small kindness leaks out of the house every day to the lane. None of this is loud, none of it is showy. It is simply the soft religion of a Babylonian evening, repetitive, small, deeply familiar. For larger questions, the household sometimes turns to a quieter craft. There is in this city a profession that may sound strange to a modern listener, but that has been practiced here for a very long time. It is called, by scholars who came afterward, hepatoscopy. The word means, simply, the reading of the liver. The Babylonians believe, as do many cultures of this world, But the gods, when they want to answer a serious question, can write that answer into the body of a sacrificial animal. In this city, the sheep is the chosen animal, and the liver is the chosen page. So when an important question must be answered, should the family travel? Should the marriage be agreed? Will the child recover? A small ritual takes place. A priest of the divining order is asked to attend. A sheep is brought. Prayers are said. The animal is sacrificed cleanly, and the liver is removed and laid carefully on a small stone table. The priest reads the liver the way another man might read a tablet. He looks at the lobes, the fizzes, the color, the shape of small marks where the gallbladder sits. Each variation, by long tradition, means something. The diviners have, over the centuries, written all of this down. There are clay models of livers, divided into numbered zones, kept in temple schools as teaching tools. These models survive today, and they are quietly extraordinary. Small ceramic livers, the size of a hand, marked all over with cuneiform notes, a kind of medical chart for an ancient profession. The house we are visiting tonight is not, of course, performing such a rite. The family's questions are smaller tonight, but somewhere in the city, in a private chamber lit by a single lamp, a priest is bending over a sheep's liver, hand resting on its surface, eyes half closed, listening for the answer the gods have written. He will report his findings in soft words to the family who sent for him. He will accept a small payment in silver, weighed in the bronze pan. He will go home. There is a similar quiet craft for those who cannot afford a sheep. The Babylonians take their dreams seriously. Many households keep, by the doorway, a small clay pot for collecting breadcrumbs left over from the evening offering, because there is an old belief that a troubling dream can be transferred into the bread and then carried out and given to a passing dog. The temple schools have whole tablets devoted to dreams and their meanings. To dream of one's own teeth falling out, bad. To dream of climbing a long rope into the sky, fortunate. To dream of a date palm in fruit, usually good. To dream of a blackbird perching on the head, better not say. The list is long. Most people, most nights, simply hope to dream of nothing at all. In another small house, not far from this one, there is a different kind of evening. A young man and a young woman are about to be married. The match was agreed weeks ago between the families. Tonight, the formal contract is being prepared. A scribe, perhaps a former pupil of the kind of school we visited earlier, has come to the house with a fresh tablet and a fine reed stylus. By the lamp, in front of the witnesses, he writes out the terms. The Babylonians take their marriage contracts seriously and write them down in remarkable detail. The bride's name, the groom's name, the names of the parents on both sides, the dowry, how many sheep, how many shekels of silver, what household goods, the arrangements if the marriage fails, what the wife may keep, what she returns, how the children are provided for, the conditions if either party dies, the rights of any children, all of it, line by line, in careful cuneiform. Then at the end, the contract must be sealed. Each adult party, the groom, the bride's father, the witnesses, has a small object on a string around his neck. The object is a cylinder seal, a small carved cylinder of stone the size of a finger joint, engraved all around its surface with a tiny unique scene, a king before a god, a hero with a lion, a symbol of a particular family. The seal is, in this city, the equivalent of a personal signature. Each man rolls his cylinder across the soft clay at the foot of the contract, leaving a small ribbon of unique image impressed into the surface. The scribe smooths the edges, the clay is set aside to dry, then will be fired and kept. There are tablets like this in the temple archives that are hundreds of years old, with the small ribbons of cylinder seal images still perfectly readable, telling us, 2,500 years later, who was married to whom and on what terms. Tonight is mild, not the worst heat of summer, but it is warm enough that in many of the houses we are passing, the family will not sleep on the floor of the main room. They will sleep instead on the roof. The houses of Babylon are nearly all flat-roofed. The roof is made of beams of palm trunk, covered by woven reed mats, packed with a layer of mud, sometimes with a final coat of plaster. Most roofs are reachable by a small wooden ladder set in a corner of the courtyard, or by a stair built into the wall. In hot months, families carry their sleeping mats up there in the late evening, lay them out, and sleep under the open sky. Tonight, in the house we are visiting, the woman of the household has already gone up. The children, already half asleep, are being lifted up by their father one at a time. The mats are set out in a familiar pattern, the children in the middle, the parents at the edges, the youngest baby beside the mother. From up here, looking out across the city, the rooftops form a great, low, dim plain, every other house doing the same. Lamps wink out, one after another, behind low parapets. The river lies dark beyond the houses. A breeze comes off it, carrying a faint smell of mud and reed and damp brick. Somewhere in the distance, a baby murmurs and is hushed. Somewhere closer, an old man snores once, then is quiet. The whole city, on its rooftops, is going to sleep together. We will leave this household to its rest. There is one last walk to take tonight, through the very heart of the city, toward a great 7-stepped tower we have only glanced at from below. A tower that, more than any other thing in Babylon, will be remembered for thousands of years, sometimes by people who do not even know it was here. Let us, for the last chapter, climb softly toward it, step softly down from the rooftop, in the hush a sleeping household leaves around it, and walk back into the lanes. The city is much quieter now than it was when we entered. The market is long closed, the brewery yard is dark, the kilns are banked. Most courtyards have their lamps out. Here and there a single window still glows, a midwife sitting up with a laboring mother, a scholar reading by a small flame, a sick old man whose family is taking turns to keep him company. But these are exceptions. The body of the city is asleep. We pass under the broad processional way and turn toward the central temple precinct. The streets here are wider, the buildings taller, the walls are dressed in glazed tile, dark in the dim light, only a faint sheen catching the edge of the lamps. The house is thin out, replaced by long temple structures, storehouses, low priestly residences. There is a stillness here that is different from the stillness of the lanes. Lane stillness is the stillness of houses and breath. Temple stillness is older, drier, like the inside of a deep room. We come, finally, to a great walled courtyard. Inside that courtyard rises the building we have looked at from a distance all evening, the central ziggurat of Babylon. Its name is Etemenanki. The name means, very simply, the house of the foundation of heaven and earth. It is a hard name to live up to, and the Babylonians know it. Stand at the courtyard wall now and look up. 7 great square stages, one set on top of another, each smaller than the one below, all of them faced in glazed brick that catches the moon. The lowest stage alone is wide as several city blocks. The highest, far up, is no larger than a small house. At its peak, faintly, a single lamp glows, the same lamp, perhaps, that was glowing earlier when we were thinking of the priest with his clay tablet. The same patient man, the same patient sky. It is worth, very gently, saying a few things about this tower. It is one of the older great structures of this city, repaired and rebuilt and reglazed across many reigns, including by the king whose name is on so much of what we have seen tonight. Its lowest courses go down deeper than you would think, into the soil of older Babylons that lay beneath this one, layer below layer. Its top stage holds a small temple, sacred to Marduk, the chief god of the city. Long after Babylon has faded, this tower will be remembered in places that no one in this city has even heard of yet. Far to the west, in the writings of a small people called the Hebrews, there will be a story of a tower that men once tried to build to reach heaven, until the gods scattered their languages and the work could not be finished. The story will be set in a place called Babel, which is in their language just another way of saying Babylon. There is no clear archaeological proof that the story refers to this tower in particular, but the resemblance is hard to miss. A great stepped tower in this very city, the closest thing in the world to a man-made attempt to climb the sky. Even the name Etemenanki, house of the foundation of heaven and earth, has in it that same upward yearning. Whether the story was inspired by Etemenanki, or by an older ziggurat already in ruins by then, or by some braid of memories of all of them, no one is certain. What is certain is that, for thousands of years, the image of a tall stepped tower reaching for the sky and never quite finished will travel through paintings and poems and dreams in countries that this city's builders never even imagined existed. Tonight the tower is finished. Tonight the tower stands. The bricks at its base are warm from the day, even now. Stand a moment longer in the courtyard. There is no one here but the dark, and a single sleeping cat curled against the warm wall. At the very top of the tower, on the highest tier, there is a small chamber. We will not climb up to it tonight, not really, but it is worth saying what is up there. The chamber is plain, walls of glazed brick, washed in pale colors, a single bed made up with linen and a thin coverlet of fine wool, a small altar, a lamp, a jug of pure water, a tray of bread. The chamber is reserved by very old custom for the god Marduk. The Babylonians believe that on certain nights the god descends from heaven and stays in this small room as a guest of the city. To attend him, one woman is chosen, a priestess of the highest rank. She lives in special quarters in the temple precinct. On the proper nights, she goes up the stairs of the tower, alone, by lamp, all the way to the top, and waits. The story, as Herodotus tells it generations later, is that the god joins her. The Babylonians themselves are quieter about what actually happens in that small high room. The priestess in her own life does not speak of it. We know from much later texts that the role was taken seriously, that it was held by women of high birth, that it was considered a privilege of vast spiritual weight. We know that the chamber existed and that it was kept ready. We know that on most nights it stood empty under the stars, its lamp lit, its bed made, its small jug of water full, waiting. Tonight the chamber is empty, the lamp burns low, the wind very high up moves the curtain at the doorway, a soft regular movement, like slow breathing. The city below is asleep, the river runs on. The priest with his tablet works on the platform just outside the chamber, head down. The chamber waits. It has been waiting for a very long time, and it knows how to wait. Sleep in its own way is also a kind of waiting like that, a kind of patient room kept ready inside us for whatever wants to come. Once a year this whole city wakes itself up for a great ceremony, and tonight is not that night, so we will only mention it in passing. The Akitu, the Babylonian New Year, is a long, careful festival held in the spring. It runs for many days. It involves processions, prayers, the carrying of gods in chariots from one temple to another, public feasts, the renewal of contracts, the forgiveness of certain debts, and, at its heart, a small, strange, beautiful ritual involving the king himself. On one day of the Akitu, the king is brought into the great temple of Marduk. He is, by long tradition, stripped of the symbols of his kingship, his crown, his scepter, his ring. He is led alone before the statue of the god. There, in the silence of the inner sanctuary, the high priest performs an old gesture. He strikes the king on the cheek, not hard, but firmly enough. The king kneels. He recites a prayer in which he insists, before the god, that he has not in this past year sinned against the city. He has not destroyed Babylon. He has not abused the temples. He has not mistreated his people. If a tear comes to his eye when the priest strikes him, the god is said to be satisfied. The kingship is then returned to him, blessed for another year. The Babylonians like this ritual in their quiet way. It reminds them, and reminds the king, that even the king is not above the gods, and not above the city. That kingship is a borrowed thing, given by Marduk and renewable only with humility. There is something deeply restful in such a custom. A king who must be slapped gently every spring is a king the city can almost trust. That ritual will not be performed for many months yet. Tonight is just an ordinary night. The temple is dark, the king sleeps in his palace, and the great tower in the courtyard holds its small, quiet light at the top. As the night deepens, you can hear very faintly the sounds of those who are awake. From somewhere on the great wall, far away, a low bronze gong sounds once, twice. It is a watchman calling the hour, the way watchmen have called the hour in cities, for as long as cities have had walls. Another gong answers him, fainter, from the other side of the city. Then a third, then silence. The watchmen pace the broad walkway on the wall slowly, in pairs, lamps on long sticks held just ahead of them. They do not talk much. They look down into the dark fields, out across the moat, up at the stars. They check small mud niches where messages can be left. They drink, sometimes, a cup of warm beer one of them has brought up in a covered jug. Below them, the city lies in low, layered shadow. The Euphrates runs black, threaded with a few small far-off lamps from boats that did not put in for the night. A few rooftops still glow faintly with banked fires. The processional way is empty, except for one cat that crosses it in a long, unhurried diagonal and disappears under a wall. The bricks of the city, all the bricks we have walked past tonight, are settling into their cooler night color. The walls, the Ishtar gate, the bridge, the great ziggurat, all of them in the dark, becoming the same calm, dim tone. So it is time, very softly, to let this evening fold down the way the day folded itself away earlier. We have walked a long way. We have stood under gates the color of evening sky. We have leaned over a bridge, listened in a courtyard to the soft tick of reeds against clay, smelled bread and dates and yeast in a closing market. We have stepped over a sleeping dog, watched a gecko on a wall, seen a single lion in long grass at the edge of the plain. We have stood under a tower whose name will travel further than the city. Now there is one last thing to do. We will go very slowly, in our minds, to a quiet place. We will let this great old city continue without us, and we will, very gently, fall asleep. For our last few moments together, let yourself drift in your imagination all the way up to the highest stage of the great tower. You do not have to climb, you can simply be there, the way a thought can be anywhere it likes. The platform is small, the wind is faint and cool. The chamber just behind you glows softly with its single low lamp. The city of Babylon is spread out, far below, in the very last hour before dawn. From up here you can see it all, the double walls hardly visible now, only their tops catching the first faint hint of sky. The processional way running like a long pale line down to the Ishtar gate. The 8 gates, each one closed and watched. The bridge over the dark river, the roofs where families lie sleeping under the stars, where a baby has just turned over and not woken. The rooftops where the goats are dreaming whatever it is goats dream. The lanes where the dogs lie across the doorways and where, somewhere, a single gecko is still patient on a wall. The market where the bronze pans rest cold. The brewery yard where the kitten is still on the folded sack. The tablet schools where the boys' practice tablets are slowly drying back into earth. The breweries, the orchards, the canals shining faintly far out beyond the wall. From up here, all of it is one quiet body. You can see how small it is. You can see how loved it is. You do not need to do anything more than see it. The city has been here for centuries before this night. It will be here for centuries after. There will be other cities in other countries whose names will not yet be invented. There will be people walking lanes that do not yet exist. There will be voices and gates and rivers and small lives. None of this needs to happen tonight. Tonight is only this, the last hour before dawn, the great tower, the quiet city, the breath in your own chest. The lamps below you are going out, one by one, faster now. The watchmen on the wall are nearly finished with their last round. The river still runs on, dark and slow. There is no rush in any of it. There is no place to be. There is no thing to hold. 2,500 years from now, this city will be a quiet field of low mounds, and travelers will pick through the dust, looking for fragments of glazed brick, the color of old evening sky. They will not find the city you are watching tonight. They will find only that it was here. That too is fine. Tonight the city is here. Tonight you are here. The walls hold. The river runs. The lamp at the top of the great tower burns its last patient hour. Only this, which is small and still and almost asleep, now close your eyes. The lamps grow smaller. The city is asleep. The river is calm. The wind is soft. There is nothing to hold. There is no place to be. You are quiet inside. You are quiet outside. Sleep well, gentle listener. Sleep well.